Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Dr. Hazeltine, I'm wondering right after tonight, can I get about 2 minutes with you?
Sure.
Great. Got to kind of update you on some stuff.
Okay. Yep, not a problem.
And beg your mercy.
Yeah, we'll see about that.
Well, this is as close to in person as we can get. I can't knock on your door and camp outside of your office. So,
what's your favorite hardware store?
What's your favorite pizza delivery?
There you go.
Gino's in East Town.
What is it?
Gino's in East Town.
Okay.
Pretty good.
Yeah, it's a like a third generation family, hole in the wall, and I went to my undergraduate near New York City, and I kind of got spoiled on that Brooklyn pizza.
Yeah.
And I don't really the chains like Jets and Domino's and whatever, just it doesn't cut it. But this is honest to gosh Italian pizza.
The real deal. The real deal.
He buys mozzarella in these big bricks from that dairy out in Coopersville, and he shreds his own cheese, he makes his own dough, uses olive oil, makes his own sauce. It's not canned, it's not frozen, it's it's just
sounds like the real deal. Hi, Miss Shirley. Pam, how are you?
Hello, good evening.
Hi, Pam. Hi, Shirley. I can see your glasses. I see the top half of Shirley and the bottom half of Terrence. There we go. There we go. See, we can do this.
Yeah, so Shirley needs to drop hers down. I need to push mine up.
Yeah. So we're looking at seeing as much of people as we can in this virtual medium. So Lee is joining us here. There he is. Hi, Lee. How are you?
Very good. Very good. How are you? Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
You got good lighting there on you. That's nice. That works.
Yeah. I happened to buy a ring light that's working pretty good. So.
Yeah, they're very good. I haven't used it myself, but I have a light beside me here that I use for this purpose. I can control the temperature of it and the brightness of it. And all right. Well, we are at 8 o'clock. My chiming clock at the back tells me so. That clock, you will hear it in the background from time to time, and it was a gift. When I left Alberta, I'd been working with Christian schools there for about 25 years. And so that was a going away gift. So I like hearing the tone. All right. Well, people have survived the week, I take it. Just a quick update. As I said in my post, I wasn't going to comment on the posts that you did this week because you've given me your final draft as a submission, and so that's where I'll give you the feedback about that. I am reading through each of your posts and replies in the grade book and commenting there, so I've gotten some of those done. I have 3 courses on the go right now, so the other 2 have only a couple of students each in them, so they're pretty quick. So I start with them, knock them off, and then I start working on 920, which always takes a little bit more time. So but really seeing some great replies. That's one of the things I really like, is to see how students are responding to one another with additional ideas, citing sources, sharing experiences that are relevant to help, expand the thinking. So that's really good. So right now I'm going through the discussion forum. I'll give you feedback on that over the coming days. I've done 2 or 3, and then my back has gone out and I'm wearing this brace today, and I was just started feeling really tired. I thought, I just don't have the energy to do this. So I don't know what's going on. And then my car wouldn't start. And so I had to have that towed, but, these are what we call champagne problems. I have my fully paid for car towed away from my fully paid for house. Woe is me, really, like I got a text message from a friend from Alberta, talking about somebody that we both know and love that's caught up in conspiracy theories and, all kinds of health issues. And, my car not starting is in the broad scheme of things is nothing. Thank you, Jesus, I have a car. So it's kind of like paying taxes. People grumble about paying taxes. And the response to that is, oh, so you have enough income to pay taxes. That's nice. If you make enough money that you have to pay taxes, yay, that's good. You don't want to be in a situation where you don't make enough money to pay taxes. So that's not a good thing. Anyway, so champagne problems. So a couple of thoughts that I wanted to share with you right off the bat about chapter 3 coming up. And then I'm going to go through my dissertation and show you, kind of a little bit of what it looks like. Yours will be different because the headings are somewhat different, so don't be worried about that. But as you think about methodology, and this is the key thing that we are trying to do by having chapter 3 come right after chapter 1. And it has some problems with it, but I think the concept is good. You really need to make sure that your method addresses the problem. You need to make sure that the problem that you have laid out and the research questions that you have stated in chapter 1 are correctly, accurately, thoroughly addressed in chapter 3. And so very often there's a repeat of the research questions in chapter 3, and you go back over that and you make sure that everything matches up. But you've got to use the right methodology. Now, the problem with doing this is that a lot of times you will find your methodology through your literature review, but hopefully you're already reading. And that was the other tip I wanted to give you, which is that very often the methodology you're going to be using is not new. It's not like nobody has ever used, research anywhere near your field. If nobody's researched anywhere near your field, you are out in left field. You don't want to be so far out that nobody's touched on your topic. So, science and knowledge advances incrementally. We're always building on top of what somebody else has done. So they've studied this thing here, but they haven't studied this little thing over here to the side of it, or this little thing on top, or this little piece of it inside it. So as you're thinking about your method, you want to make sure that you're finding that, make sure you find it. You will find it. You'll find the methodology typically from reading what other researchers have done in that field. So in the area of bullying, which was my area, there's a couple of ways we can study this. We can interview people. We can observe behaviors on the playground and the hallways, or we can survey them. But for a variety of reasons, the most commonly used one, saves time, it's efficient, get a broad data set, is the survey. And there was a recognized instrument out there available that was highly regarded. So that's what I use for my methodology. So make sure that the approach you're using, it fits with the problem. Make sure that your theoretical foundation, your theory that is, addressing this topic, that there's a theoretical underpinning, that should also fit in with the methodology as well. So everything should tie together. A lot of the theory you will see from other researchers. And so, as you're reading, be looking for that as you're reading these articles. And you may want to dive into some of the dissertations that others have done, which will be very similar in structure and design. It'll give you some ideas. Now, remember, dissertations are like what you're going to produce. You're not an expert yet. This is your first shot at really in-depth, thorough research. So it's not going to be perfect. And so dissertations don't typically end up as a book, but after the fact, they can turn into articles and books when you do further refining and thinking about it. So you always have to be cautious about the findings in dissertations. Just be aware that, you know, it's being done by people under the guidance of an experienced mentor, but often there are, you know, it's not peer reviewed by multiple experts in that particular field necessarily. So have issues. So look in your articles as you're reading them, look for the methodology section of the research and see what methods did they use, what was their theoretical foundation. That usually comes in the background of the discussion early on in the article. And then when you get to the methodology, this is the number. You'll see a lot of the same things that you're being asked to do in your capstone project are similar to the articles that you read. They'll talk about the participants, they'll talk about the sample size, they'll talk about the instruments that were used. So this is just standard practice. But as you're reading it, look for the theories, look for the methodologies, and, you know, be cautious about going too far afield into a theory that, you know, nobody has seen that link before. If you make a connection nobody else has seen, that's great, but we're going to look at that pretty carefully to make sure, does this really fit? Does this logically fit with what, you know, you've said before and what other researchers have found? So in my case, I mentioned to you last week or the week before, social identity theory was the theoretical underpinning that kids want to belong, kids want to behave the way other kids behave. And one of the evidences for that was this Israeli kibbutz that I came across. And when the researchers who were looking at bullying in this kibbutz and noticed there wasn't any, and they asked people, what program are you using? They said, we don't have any program. We just don't do that. Like we just never would do that. In other words, the culture of the community was so deeply ingrained that it wouldn't cross their minds to behave in that fashion. And so again, that was an evidence that confirmed that social identity theory, that people want to belong, they want to fit in, and they will adjust their behaviors in order to fit in with the norm group, is a powerful thing. So I had my theory, I could see it in practice here, and that became the theoretical underpinnings for why bullying might be different in a Christian school. That's the point. It wasn't just, oh, here's an interesting theory, it's kind of related, so I'll use it. No, the very fact of this theory explains why I would want to see, is it any different in this Christian school environment? Because it's a different norm group. And so based on the theory that we have already, I would expect to see different behaviors. The theory would lead me to think about certain experiences I would see in this environment. It should be different. So I'm going to study that. It's a problem. You know, chapter 1, nobody else has looked at this. It's a significant problem there. And my method to survey students in this particular environment is based on sound theory. It should be different when the cultural group is different. So it all tied together. And that's what we're working towards, to get your method to tie directly into your research problem in question. You won't get it perfect the first time around or the 5th time around. We keep working at it, okay? All right. So that's the goal, and you will find a lot of those ideas from the articles that you've already read. You will refine it as you get into your literature review. Any questions about that going forward? All right, great. I'm going to share my screen here with you.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So would that, with your theory, be something that you would use with the assumptions? Like, because the theory says this, I will assume that this culture, students will act that way. Is that how you get the assumptions? Or is it just something that...
Yeah, no, assumptions are typically a little different than that. Assumptions are things that, so the theory leads you, it leads more to your hypothesis or to your methodology. Okay. The assumptions are things that you're, you are, if you're interviewing people, you're assuming that they're going to be honest with you.
Okay. Right.
When you take a random sample, you assume that it's representative. You don't know for sure, but you have to operate on the assumption that it is. When you survey people,
okay,
they're not going to, and believe me, when you survey high school students, I was in some of those groups that were surveyed years ago about, do people take drugs and whatever. We're high school students. What do you think we did with those surveys? And yes, they were anonymous, but we didn't care. We were all, as far as the survey people, the researchers knew, we were all strung out on heroin, like just, oh yeah, 3 times a week, unfortunately. So there are students out there who will just mess with you because they can. And I was one of those. So whatever, I don't know if somebody was doing a dissertation on it, but they certainly had some outlier data in there that was confounding variables. Anyway, okay. Anything else? All right, I'm going to share this screen with you here. All right, so last time we looked at this, so this is my dissertation. The last time we looked at it, we went through problem, the first chapter, chapter 1, the problem and the background significance. That got us up to about page 36. 16. So we've talked about that first section being roughly 15 pages or so. And I was just looking at to see, and my project works out very similar to those rough guides. About 30 pages later, so 30 pages is the literature review. That's typically your biggest chunk of the dissertation. 30 pages, up 30 to 50. Is not unusual in the literature review. So that gets us to the research method. And remember, this was using APA version 6, and it was a different university. So headings will be a little different, formatting will be a little different, but basically it's going to be very similar. So research method. So this is the section that you're going to start working on in the coming 2 weeks. And I start with an introduction. There was no heading there in this one, but in yours, there will be a heading for introduction. And talk a little bit about the problem of bullying. So there's a little bit of review of what I said in chapter 1. And then we talk a little bit about the setting. It's a quantitative study, a sample included students. So just really, and then analysis using analysis of variance in order to understand 3 factors. So just kind of a synopsis of everything we're going to talk about in this chapter. And then I go into more detail. So in this investigation, I was required to put in the IRB number. It was a replication study. So I'm doing a very similar study to what somebody else has done before, but with a difference. Now, one of the things you'll notice here, I'm now in first person, okay? This was my final, okay? You are in the proposal stage. So you can use I, but it will be future tense. So in this investigation, I intend to, or I will be, or I plan to, or I have arranged for, those kinds of things. So it's all going to be future tense at the proposal stage. When you come down to your final project and you've done the research and you have it, you're going to have to revise all of this and put it into past tense. And it may be different. You may not have done what you set out to do, but this is your plan, okay? So the independent variables, and again, your guide is going to tell you everything they want in each heading. So every university is going to require different things. So don't follow this, but it's more the concept and the principles that I'm after here. The guide will tell you everything that's supposed to be in each heading. And for methodology, just follow the headings right in order. Just that's your outline. It's done. So I explained the independent variables, grade, gender, years attending the school, the dependent variables, 10 kinds of bullying behavior, which I list, the location where bullying occurred, and whether they reported it. So a lot of things that I am testing and looking for at the back end with 3 independent variables. And then I talk about I analyzed the data, found that students were more aware of actual incidents of bullying than either the teachers or parents. That's confirmed by other researchers. Let me back up. I used student survey data because some researchers have found students were more, so rather than interviewing teachers and parents, the reason why I chose a student survey, because the research says that students are much more aware of bullying than parents. So why are you doing this? Should be grounded in the research you have. That I chose this method because the population and sample, how many students I had, the student body was comprised of approximately equal numbers of boys and girls. So gender was a key factor. I want to make sure I've talked about that. So again, discussion of the population and sample. Let's see, instrumentation and materials. So this is the Ulvaeus bullying questionnaire, was, you know, kind of the standard survey instrument. There's a couple of other ones out there, but this is probably the best known. And it was used as the basis. And it was also the survey that was used in a very, very large World Health Organization survey of multiple countries. So again, this is a reputable, recognized, well-known, well-used survey. So I'm using it. Okay. Again, you want to say to your readers that I did my homework. I didn't just find a survey that was cheap. I found kind of the gold standard, the best one that's available. Sometimes the gold standard is very expensive, and so you got to navigate that too. And maybe you don't use the gold standard; you go with the bronze or the silver, whatever.
Dr. Hazeltine,
yes.
I have a quick question. Sorry to interrupt you.
Sure.
Thinking about what if I need to create a survey instrument? How would I approach that at this stage, knowing that that instrument has not been created yet?
That is a very good question. Now, that is what tied me up for multiple years, because I was trying to use an instrument that I had created and had used, and I got it vetted by multiple people, 6 professionals to look at it to say it was good. And I got turned down by the IRB saying, hey, this is, you know, it's a dissertation in itself to validate a survey. Now, having said that, so are you doing a quantitative study or a qualitative?
Qualitative.
All right, qualitative is a little different. Okay, so that's, if you're going to do a quantitative study, you really want to stick with recognized, known instruments. Qualitative is a little different because you're really going after, like in a qualitative research, you often don't even know the questions you're going to ask initially. And so you create a set of questions, you begin to interview people, and you realize, oh, this is leading me in a whole different direction here. Again, as an example, one of the courses that I took for my, you know, the coursework I did was specifically in qualitative research, qualitative analysis, and we had to conduct an interview with someone, record it, transcribe it word for word, analyze it, do all this stuff. And so in talking to this parent, they talked about, you know, their experience of being bullied and where it happened and when it happened and how little support they got from teachers and whatever. And so as they talked, I got more and more ideas. Now, I only had to do one survey or one interview, but if I had interviewed someone else, I would have probably adjusted my questions based on that first interview. So qualitative, you don't know in advance necessarily the right questions to ask. And so often you'll start by, you know, exploring with 2 or 3 subjects. And as you get feedback, they may kind of, oh, they all talk about their siblings and the influence that their siblings had, or the influence of their first job experience. Or, I mean, again, I don't know your topic necessarily, but from the interview with your subjects, you often will come up with new ideas and things to explore. So your questions then will change for your subsequent subjects. You may go into more detail there. So talk to me about the relationship you had with your siblings. Were you firstborn or secondborn? So there is more freedom with a qualitative than a quantitative. So I think you're okay there. You'll want to have the questions reviewed by, well, I will review them, your chair will review them, just to make sure that they're written well. It's difficult to write good survey questions, and there's a technique to it. And then, and you can, from a qualitative study, you will get data. You will get, you know, so many people mentioned this, so many people mentioned that, 40% of the subjects mentioned this or whatever. So it's not that you don't have any data, but you're not going to do the same kind of quantitative analysis with that data that you would with a quantitative survey. And so you do have more flexibility. Good question. Thanks for bringing that up. And my study here is quantitative, so it doesn't fit, you know, in every example. So then I talk about the survey instrument, some of the questions specifically in it, what they're addressing, the kind of data that it came up with in terms of frequencies, behaviors, personal experience. I gave more detail about the questionnaire, internal consistency, Cronbach's alpha of decimal 80 or so. Cronbach's alpha is a standard reliability score, and if you can be too high, like if you get up to 95 or better, it's so consistent that it suggests that there's redundant questions. There's questions that aren't getting at anything new, and so it's probably a poor design. So typically 65 to 85 correspondence on a Cronbach's alpha is considered to be pretty consistent, pretty reliable. So then I talk about reliability, and so that's some consistency data there. This one here talked about, you know, whether people identified themselves as a bully and whether peers identified them as a bully, and found what correlation there might be there. So just going into background about what I had researched on the instrument. So you want to be, you know, you dig into the data on the instrument. People have probably reviewed it. If it's a recognized instrument, they usually will publish information about their reliability, about their validity. You may find a reviewer or two who's looked at the instrument and critiqued it or found some, you know, flaws with it. So that's part of what you would include in your instrumentation. And we talk about data collection. In my case, because I was working with children, the other problem, in addition to them not accepting my survey, which I've used, it's a perfectly legitimate survey in my opinion, but anyway, I'd used many times as a principal. I didn't want that, and they didn't want me surveying students because they're minors and there are all kinds of problems. And so I had to have the school run the survey and then give me the data. So I entered into a data use agreement with the school. Instead of me actually doing the survey, they did it, and then they gave me the data, and I gave them a report as a thank you. Then data analysis. What are you going to analyze? What kind of information? Your null hypothesis. Your null hypothesis is it says there's no relationship between these. And then if you find that there is a relationship, then you have disproved the null. So you always have a null. And then you're looking to see, is it anything but nothing? Okay. So if you find something, then that's important. Okay. Rather than saying it's going to be this, and maybe it's a little bit less than this, and you don't try to specify exactly what it's going to be. You start out by saying there's not going to be any connection. And then you find out what there is. So that's a standard scientific procedure. The test I used was the three-way ANOVA. Protection of participants, you know, just in terms of my relationships. So the surveys were anonymous. I released no data. I had them under lock and key. These are some of the things that I think you would have reviewed in your IRB training. and then I summarize it. So this section is 5 or 6 pages. It could be longer, but typically your methodology is not that long, especially at the proposal stage. But you want to cover something in each of those sections in the style guide. So make sure you address everything that's in there as you go forward. Keep it in future tense. This is what you're going to be doing. I will keep the data under lock and key. I will be working with, you know, this employer or that employer, or adults in this situation, or church here. Everything in the future tense, and perfectly legitimate to use first person, I. One thing that you shouldn't use through your writing, by the way, and this is just a side note, and I guess maybe because I'm a little old school, but a lot of writers and readers do not want to see the use of the second person, you. So in reviewing this, you need to, no, don't say you, because then you're telling me what I need to do as a reader. Don't tell me what I need to do, or I will do, or could do. You know, as when reading this, researchers need to be aware of, or researchers should consider, or the reader should be aware of that, or readers need to be alerted to this fact, or good researchers will. Any number of ways of saying, making the point without saying you. Okay, so just do a search of your entire document. If you come across the word you, get rid of it, replace it with another form of wording. It's a little bit more professional and academically approved. Okay, so that's it for this particular thing, and I'm going to stop the sharing there. Shorter section, a little bit more technical, but all the data should be out there. If it's a recognized survey, if it is a qualitative study and you're coming up with the questions, then pay attention to other qualitative studies in your general field and the kinds of questions that they're asking. One of the key things is with good questions is you want to make sure you're not leading the witness, okay? How often were you frustrated with the teacher response to bullying? That assumes that they were frustrated. You can't say that, okay? You say, how did teachers respond to your request for help? Everything has to be neutral. You can't assume that the participant was frustrated or, trying to think of other leading questions, but you can't make assumptions of the experience of the interviewee. You have to make neutral questions. Qualitative is somewhat easier than quantitative. Quantitative is really, really sticky. There's just all kinds of things with quantitative surveys. And again, I would highly recommend that you use a recognized, approved survey. If you want to go a different route than that, I would need to check with the university to see if that's even acceptable. But I got hung up on that, so I wouldn't advise it. And I was told, well, it's not advised. It's not advised. And, after trying it several times, basically getting turned down, I look back on that experience saying, they should have told me, don't do this. You will never get approved. It was kind of like, it's not advised. Well, look, I'm an experienced administrator. I've done this survey for, years and years and years. I know how it works. I understand it. I've refined it and revised it. And so it's not advised, but I'm willing to put the work in and I will get it approved and reviewed by mathematicians and survey experts and other principals. So I was confident that I had a good product. And at the end of the day, they just said, nope, can't do that. That's a project in itself. Okay. Somebody should have said that from the get-go. Okay. So quantitative, get a recognized instrument, or we need to get it approved in advance, because I went to the IRB and it was flat out turned down. Qualitative, look at what other people are doing. And there's some really funny things, by the way. SurveyMonkey has some really good information about good survey instruments, But one that I just came across about 6 months ago, or maybe a year ago, is this one. There is in survey participants a normal bias to be kind. Okay, so people have a tendency to, you know, they don't want to put you down to the restaurant or whatever it is. They tend to err on the nice side. They view themselves as nice people. They want to give a nice review. And so there's a bias towards the more positive answers, okay? There's a second bias at work as well, which is there's a bias towards the first choice. So people typically, they look at the first couple of choices and often will pick those first choices over later choices. So if you set up your survey so that, you know, rank the service in this restaurant or from this company, and your first choice, number one, is excellent, and then good, and then fair, and you will get a biased result towards the positive answers. Because A, people want to be kind, and B, those were the first choices. So it is recommended in your surveys that you reverse the order. Number one is poor service, and 2 is fair, and 3 is okay, and 4 is good, and 5 is excellent. And then what happens is people go across the list, and then they stop where they feel comfortable, rather than just picking the first 2 or 3. Their bias to be kind and fair leads them past the first 1 or 2. So I had just done A, B, C, D, F. I'd always put the positive one first. Wrong. So I've revised the survey I use on bullying on my own survey to reflect that information. And then there's other elements as well. But SurveyMonkey has some good material on that. If you use a reputable, recognized survey, it's not a problem. You go with that. All righty. Questions for me? I am just so incredibly clear. It's just so happy with myself. Or you don't know enough yet to ask a good question, and that could be scary too. So we'll get you there. Okay.
I had a question just to clarify something you'd already mentioned about being sure you were neutral as not to lead the interviewees on.
Yep.
For instance, when you mentioned you wouldn't say how frustrated or how often were you frustrated. Now, would it be leading them on? So if you just ask, are you frustrated, or should it be at the point where you want to just say, how did you feel about da 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 da?
The better way to go is, how did you feel? Yeah, because as soon as you say, you know, how frustrated or were you frustrated, that leads them down that particular path. Okay, better to be open-ended and completely neutral. How did you respond to this event, or how did that make you feel? You know, when the company did this, and it's one of the reasons why in our news today, you get just crazy data, and you know, every news organization, if they have a bias and they're really not interested in fair and accurate reporting, they word the questions, like, I think I got I don't know, one of the political parties sent me a survey in the mail a little while ago, and it was all, how much do you hate this, and how much do you which of these policies should we eliminate, or, which of these are the worst things, and is whatever. So yes, keep it as neutral as possible. I'm very bland. I'm sorry. It's just survey questions should be bland. All right. I will be finishing up. Hopefully I will have the discussion forum reviewed. I think I've done 3 or 4. I'll try to get those done tomorrow, and it'll take me a few days to work through your first chapters, and I'll have those. My goal is to have them back to you within a week for sure, and that'll give you time. Revising is usually pretty straightforward unless you've got big holes, if there's something missing, but usually I'll give you enough information in my comments or sometimes I'll just type in the corrected word and you just have to accept it and, you know, make the changes. So revising it is typically, you know, a couple of hours and you're done. It shouldn't be massive unless you've got significant problems or you know, I don't know. But hopefully you'll have lots of time to do that. And then when you get chapter 3 into me, we'll do the same thing, and it should come back to you within a week so that you can make revisions and get it out to your chairs. And then we'll have it back to you by the end of week 7. So you'll have a full week to make any final revisions in your final draft for the end of week 8. So it worked pretty well last year. And so as long as I can keep on with you know, the lit review is the big one. If I get a dozen 30 pagers, that will take me a while. So just so you know, but I will get it done. I will get it done. All right. Well, God bless you. Hang in there. Just keep plugging away faithfully. Follow the guide. Keep that guide is your Bible. So have it in front of you. Have it. I would print it out so you can be referring to it as you're typing. Look at it. Even checking off things in each section. Did I do that? Did I do? Oh, it asked for this. Okay. Because that's a lot of times that's where people get hung up. They asked for 5 things. You gave us 4. So you're missing something. David, question?
Well, no, I was just going to say, I did just that. But I made just a brief outline of what each paragraph should say. And as I was writing it, I was going back and using that like a checklist, like, did I have enough references? Did I address this? Did I address that? So that I had 4 or 5 items for each of the paragraphs.
Okay.
And if you haven't read mine yet, if I was unable to supply some of that, I left you a little note.
Okay. Okay. That might be a helpful document for me to see, is your outline, because maybe that's something I could make available to others in the assignment resource and just say, hey.
I just sort of shortened up what was in the style guide.
Right.
And just put it into bullet points.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and to be honest, you know what? It's better that you do it yourself. It's all there. Yeah. I think if people, I like the idea. I think that's great. You know, some way of just checking out. Okay, did it.
When I write it out like that, actually I use dictation software, but when I summarize it like that, it sort of sticks in my brain.
Yeah, and that's why I think that's better that everybody do that individually. I'm not gonna make available anything simpler than what's there. We can read and summarize it how you wish, but I like that strategy. And that does hit at something that I graded an assignment for another course, and they asked for 3 things. And my comments were often, you know, I really appreciate how you addressed this and this, but you didn't actually speak to this issue over here. And so when the assignment gives 3, and there were 3 bullet points in the assignment, it's really clear, this, and this, 3 questions. And sometimes they hit around it without actually addressing it. And that's a fundamental flaw. No matter how well written, what wonderful information you have, if you don't address what the assignment calls for, then it's missing something. You're going to have to put it in sooner or later. And that's, the sooner you get stuff in, the closer you are to your finished project, because this keeps going back and forth and refined and revised. And so that's a great strategy. So any other thoughts? All right. Well, God bless you. I'm an email away, a Zoom call away. And then Terrence, where did you go? You're not on my screen. Oh, there you are. You want to chat with me for a couple minutes. So we will say goodbye to the rest of you, and have a good week. You're welcome.
See you next week.
Yep.